think some people are coming in, but still a couple. But we'll go ahead and get started. If you'll just make everybody feel really awkward when they do come in late, that's ideal. Okay, so I know that you're hoping that we make this as difficult, painful, and as awkward as possible. So we're going to. Nah, just kidding. So what we want to do is be able to really kind of just baseline talk about some marriage stuff and really give couples an opportunity to get some basics, some things that might be helpful, and as well just to have a basis for some future conversation and some future working together on a case of marriage. So one of the things that we did when you came in, you gave us your email. We are not going to stalk you and send you a bunch of junk email. But what we are going to do is I'm going to send you an invite to a Right Now Media website platform. And what that is basically it's an online resource where we at Agape have paid for it for your access. And inside of it, it has handfuls of classes, online videos about marriage, parenting, finances, a variety of different things. But it also has, like, for kids and stuff like that, too, it has, like, a bunch of kids, like, stories and videos and things like that are really helpful. So I know for myself, I've gone on there, and there's been, like, a handful of different marriage classes and things like that that you could walk through together with your spouse. That would be really helpful. And so it's just a free resource for you, and we want you to have access to it, and the only way we can really get access to it is to email you. So you'll receive an invitation, so if you'll even check your junk mail and things like that, depending on how clear your handwriting was on that on that sheet. If for some reason you're like, I just didn't get an email, there's about a 30% chance that we just messed up, and then there's about a 20% chance that we couldn't read it, and there's about a 5% chance that we just lost the sheet completely. And so if you're like, hey, I didn't get that email, if you'll just send us a note, and we'll with your email address on it, we'll send it to you. We'll send you the link. So it's a good resource, seriously, and I would definitely highly recommend it. What you got for me? I don't think the red one works, but one of the things, that's not good. So one of the things that we're putting out for you is this is a little bit of a trial run, okay? Obviously, we had a one that's going on at the same time, and this is new for us as a whole. So any kind of pro tips from you or some observations from you will be helpful. But what we're going to try to do is do 4 of these, and those 4 basically include tonight, which is seeing the problem, next month, which will be communicating in conflict, how to fight well, actually do the fighting well. And the next month will be communicating love, and then the final one is marriage with the end in mind. Kind of the idea of being able to plan long-term and look long-term at what is helpful for couples and for how to really live out the stuff. And this is what we mean by it. Like, I've basically forced my wife to write in a binder. She doesn't like to plan anything, but to do 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, and basically just ask a series of questions what we wanted life to look like. And then we just, on a road trip, answered some of those questions the best we knew how, and then started thinking through what marriage and life would look like and what we needed to accomplish between now and then in order to effectively make that happen. So that's one of the things that we'll talk about in December. But tonight really is about understanding that everybody has problems. So if you showed up here and you don't have marriage problems, I don't know why you're here. But that's not just you, but everybody, me. I mean, I was just saying something snarky to my wife right before we started. I was like, dang it. I got to at least be good 20 minutes before we start. So we all have problems, but the problem underneath the problem is that we don't have the ability to see our problem. We can't see it well. And so what we end up doing is a lot of times we end up spinning our wheels on problems that are happening in our marriage, and the reason we're spinning our wheels is because we're trying to solve problems that don't actually exist, because we don't actually want to deal with the right problem or the real problem that's happening in us. And we settle for a lot of cliches, and we try to communicate better, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So one of the things I want to kind of help you do is to be able to understand the nature of your argument, and then how we can get to the point where we see the problem. So I don't know if any of you are brain scientists. I hope you're not, because you may hold me accountable to what I'm about to tell you. But this is pretty much based on research, based on what I can tell you. Okay, so each person, this is your brain. very, very good drawing. And in your brain, you have this thing called the amygdala, okay? And it operates your fight, flight, or freeze mechanism that happens in your brain. So let's say, for example, a lion basically walked through this door right now, right? Just walking through here. Most of you would probably run. Some of you there's a couple of you would try to fight the lion, all right? Maybe even ignorantly, but you'd fight the lion. Fighting a lion is never a good idea, but that's the thing that you would try to do. Some of you would freeze. So you heard this before, fight, flight, or freeze. The reason you make that decision and that response in your brain is your amygdala basically sends cortisol to your cerebral cortex. So would be like your cerebral cortex. Looks like a football. All right. A lot of terrible games today. So this is your cerebral cortex. So what it does is it sends cortisol to your cerebral cortex, which freezes that part of your brain, and you begin to only function in your fight, flight, or freeze. So if you were to think through how your brain functions, your brain can handle about 4 factors at any given time. So I'm going to use markers to kind of describe what this might look like. So you have 4 factors, and if you do factorial math, that means you can do about, so if you're 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 3 is 6, times 4 is 24. You can have like 24 variables at any given point in your brain based on a circumstance or a situation. Let's say, for example, you needed to buy broccoli at the commissary and there wasn't commissary. You're having a generally good day, and you think to yourself, well, I could buy broccoli here. I don't need broccoli. You can come up with about 24 different solutions. I just say that because we saw no broccoli at the commissary that day. So, but if you are angry or something happens and that your brain begins to secrete cortisol to your cerebral cortex, you lose the ability to process things. And you actually begin to drop factors in your brain and your ability to process information. So let's say as you get angry, it sends that cortisol to your cerebral cortex and freezes it, and you begin to drop markers, right? And now, just very quickly, with that frozen cerebral cortex, now you can only come up with 3 factors, which would be 1 times 2 times 3, 6 variables. Your ability to process information and to come up with different decisions begins to radically reduce the more angry you get. And then if you get continued angry, next thing you know, you're just dropping markers. And what happens is basically you become very binary in how you think. There's either right or there's wrong. And you can't actually see the problem because you're in a survival context. Because our brains work like that all the time. And so when we get into a fight with one another, it happens in our social context as well, is that we really struggle to think through and to see the problem for what it is. And so if we're looking at even how this actually functions, my wife walked in the room, so I'm going to get in trouble, but here we go. Okay. This is you. You can see the stick figure. This is your spouse. Does that make sense? Arrows. This is what they do. This is what I see. This is what I do. And this is what they see. Okay. So, if you can see on stage here or on the screens up there, hopefully, 2 people. Again, this is what they do. Your spouse does. This is what I see. This is what I do. This is what they see. Okay, so we got that figured out. Now, for all of us, and I don't want to have like a mob fight breakout, so be cool. But for all of us, we tend to there's something that our spouse particularly does that may drive us a little bit nuts, okay? Now, I could have you shout out the thing that your spouse does, and feel free if you feel comfortable not getting hockey checked. But I know so maybe you know the thing that you do that drives your spouse particularly crazy, a unique, specific thing. I'm going to give you a chance to shout that out in a safe manner. I just want to reiterate for you, this is intended to be safe. But I'll go first to kind of give you an indication of what I'm talking about. Okay, so When we lived in Colorado, it was always kind of cold. Not always, but generally speaking, it's colder. Great state. And we had a ceiling fan in our bedroom, and for whatever reason, the ceiling fan light switches were right next to the light. So the lights and the ceiling fan were right next to each other as soon as you walked in the bedroom. And we lived there for 6 years. I never could figure out which light was what, right? So inevitably I'd walk in, I'd flick the light, but it was really the ceiling fan. And my wife would be laying in bed or getting ready to go to sleep or whatever, and they'd turn the ceiling fan on and it would make her really, really cold. And it would infuriate her every single time. She's like, why can't you figure out which light switch is what? And I was like, I don't know. She's like, we've literally lived here for 6 years. And so I really never solved that problem. I never put tape on it, which somebody who would maybe thought through it would do. I never did that. I just kept turning on the light. And one day she kind of just lost it. And it really was, I didn't know what that was really about, right? But it wasn't just merely about the light switch. So for me, it was, I turned on the fan. Okay, now I'm bracing myself. Okay, here we go. What do you got? Raise your hand, shout it out. Nail biting. Okay, I like that. Last time I did this, somebody goes, lying. It's like, all right. I'm trying to play it cool. I'm going to throw it up there just so you don't have to, though, by the way. Yes, I saw a hand. I see your hand. Where are you? No? Just checking out? Was it lying? Okay, what else? What do we got? Eating fries. I'm hoping that's you eating fries and that you're not eating fries. Okay, what else? And laundry everywhere. Is that you? Yeah. I was like, I don't know. That's your wife. Okay. I'll take one more. What do you got? Seat up. Okay. Okay, I'm going to add a couple more that are a little less safe. Bad tone of voice, like they're just kind of a jerk, right? That could be me. Angry. Okay? So I want you to think through. I mean, you can maybe just think that in your head, okay? Keep that one to yourself. And then, what is it that I see? So what does my wife see in particular when I do this or when you do that? What do you think? What do you think when it came down to I turned on the fan repeatedly, what do you think she saw? And consider it, right? So, I mean, at first it was you're a moron, but then I didn't care, right? And then it became something a little bit more significant, right? And consider it. If I spell something wrong, you can just buzz me, okay? Inconsiderate. What else? If somebody is nail biting or doing some annoying habit, right? And they're not thinking of you, you might think inconsiderate as well, right? What about if somebody is lying? What do you see? Disrespect. Nice. Or a liar. Right? Like, Okay, good. If, I'm going to stay completely away to the eating fries one. If you're leaving laundry everywhere, lazy slob, right? Or, okay. If I think a lot of these, right? So if somebody's being a jerk or they're having a bad tone of voice to you, you see a jerk, right? It's not super difficult to understand. And then if I see this, right? If I perceive this, then what do I do? Yeah, angry. I might be sarcastic. That's my go-to. I see a hand back there? Okay. Criticize. Anybody passive-aggressive in here? Think any passive-aggressive people? Up top. There we go. That's all I like to see. Passive-aggressive, that gets just the initials. Everybody knows what that means. It's if you're not tracking passive-aggressive, what that actually means, you just make them pay in other ways, right? Like, yeah, good. And then if I do this, right, then what do they see? Yeah, we'll see, like, well, if they see a jerk, right? A crazy person. A what? Yeah. Yeah, and if somebody's being, there's a lot of us who don't really handle conflict super well, and so we just kind of shut down. Oh yeah, Ingram. Yeah, definitely. We kind of shut down, right? Just get quiet. If somebody gets quiet and avoids you, right, what do you think of them, right? There could be a lot of different interpretations that come out of that, right? You could think that they're arrogant. You could misinterpret it in that realm. You could think that they're, do I? Yeah, so there's a ton of stuff, okay? Now, if they see this, then what are they going to do? Right. Oftentimes, they're going to be angrier, and it gets into the same cyclical form, like deal that happens, right? I like to refer to this as the cycle of doom, because what happens is you don't actually, once you get into it, you can't remember who started what or why you're mad at what, right? And the crazier thing about it is you start to get to the point where you actually need your spouse to do the very thing you say you don't want them to do in order to justify your previously held opinion of them. Let me repeat that. You get to the point where you actually need your spouse to do the very thing you say you don't want them to do in order to justify your previously held opinion of them. Okay, so for instance, goes like this. My wife tells me, you always turn the fan on. Like, I don't always turn the fan on. That's not what I do, blah, 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 right? And she's like, you just don't care, blah, blah, blah. And I walk in, 2 days later, click, fan goes on. She gets a little pang of excitement, right? She's like, got you, sucker. Look at that. And here I am, right? That we actually get excited when they do the very thing we claim we don't want them to do, right? And so it goes, a little like this. Let's say, for example, our daughter, she's moved to the States, but when she was younger and a teenager and stuff like that, let's say, for example, we told her, hey, you need to be home at 8 p.m., right? And for whatever reason, we had thought she'd been being out too late, etc. And then we put this kind of lower curfew on him. She gets mad, slams the door, walks out, can't believe you, whatever. And as soon as she walks out, my wife and I are like, I can't believe she's going to be late again, this and this, right? We're talking, and for the next 2 hours or so, or 3 hours, we just can't believe, and she was late last time, now she's going to be late again, blah, blah, blah. And at 7:50, comes around, it's like, see, she's going to do it again. I can't believe it. It's so frustrating. I don't know why she would behave this way, but we're going to have to put our foot down here today. This isn't going to be the last time. 7:55, 7:58, 7:59, we're just like sharpening the knife, right? 7:59, 50, 51, click, she walks in the door. You think we're happy? Because what we say is, cut it close, didn't you? She's like, nothing I can do, but it makes you happy. Slam the door, walks upstairs, and then she's mad and we're mad, but we needed her to be late in order to justify a previously held opinion, right? We created a scenario where we actually needed her to do the very thing we claimed we didn't want to happen in order that we might justify this. Now, what happens is, once we get in this kind of scenario in the cycle of doom, we start causing the problem we say we don't want oftentimes. Now, what I'm not trying to do here is I'm not trying to victim blame or anything like that. What I am trying to do, though, is help us understand that really what we can control is me, and simultaneously, I have more power than I claim that I have, and I'm not always a victim in every scenario. What often happens, though, is I'll get my friend, or my wife will get her friend so-and-so, and Betty so-and-so, and I'll tell nobody really, but guys don't care. Sounds interesting. Sounds unique. And I'll tell so-and-so of this person, I'm like, can't you believe? Somebody will tell their mother, good Lord, don't do that. And they'll say, hey, I can't believe so-and-so did this. And all her friends will say, I can't believe he did that. And what we're doing is we're gathering people within our kind of network in order to create or to help essentially justify ourselves, right? We create scenarios and we create worlds where this is the case. Okay, so I want you to think about like this. So let's say I came home I don't cook hardly anything ever. I cooked 1 week of my life while Heather was gone, and it was very below average. And so I don't cook. Let's say I come home and I ask Heather, what's for dinner? And she says, why am I always the one who is cooking dinner, blah, blah, blah. You're a jerk, your mom's ugly. And I was like, whoa, like what did I do? And I just go right into it, right? And the reason I just go right into it is because I fundamentally am in a place where I need to justify myself, okay? And I will actually then engage her and but if I approach that scenario with kind of this not desire to justify myself or no need to justify myself, it may help me solve the problem. And this is kind of where we want to go from here, is that a lot of times I'll ask people like, what do we do right here to help us get out of this cycle of doom, where we're constantly causing and creating scenarios where we actually need to justify ourselves, and we may actually be causing some of the very problems we say we don't want. How do we get out of this? And a lot of times people will say to me, well, Jake, what you need to do is you need to communicate. Okay, so I want to paint this picture for you. So how many of you have kids? How many of them how many of them are under the age of 2? Okay, everybody who has kids had a kid under the age of 2, so you'll still be able to relate. So let's say, so my wife, we have 6 total kids. We adopted our first 2, and then we found out 3 months later we were pregnant, so we had Gage. 6 months after he was born, we found out we were pregnant again, so we had 4 kids in 2.5 years. I wouldn't recommend that, but it's fine. And so, but the last 2, Bennett, the last one, she has a tendency to be awake a lot more than any of the others combined. But generally speaking, my wife hasn't slept consistently in about 8 years, right? So let's just say, for example, that Bennett wakes up in the middle of the night. This is Bennett. She wakes up, I can hear her crying, and the first thing that comes into my head is, I should actually get up and get Bennett, because if I go get her, then my wife will be able to sleep and I'll be super kind. But the next thought that creeps into my mind is, but I have PT in the morning, and I'm super tired. I got a lot of work to do, and I work really hard. I've been doing a really good job. Pretty awesome. And I even played with the kids last night, so I'm a pretty good dad. And I did the dishes this month, so that counts for about 6 months. And I may have even done the trash, which in Korea is like really deserving of praise. All right. Yeah. And then I think to myself, I bet she's just waiting me out. She's clearly awake. And if she's awake and not going to get her, then she doesn't appreciate me. This is going to get worse. So if you're squeamish now, you might as well just leave. And if she's just letting Bennett, clearly she's injured or something, and if she's just letting her cry, how good of a mother can she really be? She's back there. That's a joke. I'm just, it's for the point. I'm making a point. Don't cringe. It's okay. She's up there like, stand down, Jake. Good, Mom. I like this one. Okay. So what I have done is I've actually created a scenario where I've given myself positive attributes and I've given my wife negative attributes on no information other than the fact I'm trying to justify my lack of getting up and getting Bennett. Okay? So I made a decision not to go get her. Now I'm creating a scenario as to justify my previously held conceptions and behavior. Now, somebody has asked me before, like, what happens if this is actually true? Okay. But you're actually using their negative, if this is true, now you're using their negative attributes. Still, before you already made this, you made the decision, now you're going to use their negative attributes against them in order to justify your lack of making a decision. So it's still a problem. Like who here is perfect, but if every single time your spouse needs, not to do something, they use your negative attributes against you in order to justify them not doing something, that's going to be a problem, right? Because my wife's got plenty of things to choose from. All right, so for me, she's perfect. That's recorded. All right, so what we do is we create a scenario, and I just want you to think through this process, right? We create this scenario and this view where we enter into a pattern of self-deception. And the kicker about being deceived is that we don't know it. We think we're 100% convinced we're right. So let's say 2 weeks later, my wife says to me, Jake, I know we don't normally do big stuff on our anniversary, but, you just ordering a pizza and then me still having to put the kids to bed and watching a movie isn't what I would really do to celebrate my 15-year anniversary. It doesn't feel like you appreciate me. And I would be like, me appreciate you? You don't appreciate me, right? And now we're in this big argument. But the reason I think that she doesn't appreciate me is because I manufactured a scenario which now I view all things through. Because we carry these boxes with us, and we start to see everything through the lenses that we manufacture in order to justify our opinions. What if we aren't right? What if we have actually manufactured lenses to view our spouse that are actually manufactured specifically to justify ourselves? And now, the reason we fight constantly is because I see her in every scenario through something that isn't even actually accurate, that I just needed one time in order to get out of bed. It happens all the time. And they pile up on each other, and it gets to the point where we start spinning our wheels on every single issue. If every single issue that you have starts leading to the same fight over and over again, it's because we're in this phase right here, and that we consistently are in a scenario. Now, you may say, well, Jake, what you really need to do is communicate how you're feeling and thinking. I just want you to think through this process for me right now. Let's just say I'm a very verbal person and a great communicator when I'm in conflict. I'm not. And let's just say I elbow her and say, hey, babe, I just want to talk about this right now. Okay? Here's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling like you don't really appreciate me, and that I do all this hard work, and I played with the kids, and I did the dishes, and I just feel like you're waiting me out, and really, you don't really love me because you're not getting Bennett. How do you think that's going to go? Or if I say even more so, how good of a mom can you really be, right? I just want to, it's not going to go well, right? And so the problem isn't necessarily my communicating. The problem is what I am communicating. Through out of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so if I am completely deceived, that when I get into this communicating, now she may be patiently listen to me and say, Jake, here's the thing. I think that you're seeing this incorrectly. So let me just repeat what you just said and see if I'm hearing you correctly. And she processes with me, and we land safely in a happy, successful marriage. She might have those skills. By and large, she does not have those skills at 2 o'clock in the morning. And she definitely doesn't have those skills after not sleeping for 8 years. And so what I am doing is I'm inviting my wife into this pattern as well, oftentimes, right? And so when we get into this deal where we are just blowing up on every single issue because we have this need. So then what do we do? Okay? What is left for us to do, and what are we to kind of, how do we just solve this issue? And there's a lot of solutions. You'll see a lot of marriage books talk pretty significantly about steps to a greater marriage, and a lot of them are really good. We had some resources out there on the table, and a lot of those are really helpful and will be helpful as we kind of continue on in the seminar. But this is kind of like the problem-solving pyramid. So hopefully you can see this. And if you're looking for a resource in some of this material, there's 2 books that I would kind of recommend to you. One of them is Leadership and Self-Deception, and the other one is Anatomy of Peace. They're actually great leadership books in general, but they also help us understand this principle. And then we're going to get to a little bit of a biblical understanding of how this works, and so you can hear our case on this front. All right, so first, this in the pyramid is solving the problem. Notice, it appears to be the very last thing that you do. So here's a scenario that I want you to think through. The problem with jumping in and solving problems is the very thing I've just described. Most of the time, we don't actually know what the problem is because we approach the problem from a place of self-deception. So if we approach the problem from a place of self-deception, we're basically throwing darts to a target we can't see. And we also need to have the skills to throw the darts. So there's 2 big problems. We don't have the skills, and we also can't see the target. And so if you're that pretty much describes most marriage counseling that I enter into. If we don't have the skills to handle conflict, and we actually aren't handling the right problem ever. And so that's why solving the problem is the last kind of rung on the ladder, so to speak, or on the top of this pyramid, is there's a lot of things that have to happen first that I want to walk through. Some of this we're going to talk through even in the next couple weeks. But this first one is that this is going to sound cheesy, all right, but I'll explain. We need to obtain a heart of peace. Now, you may be like, what is that? And it is the opposite. That's a Q, Jake. That's an A. It's the opposite of a heart at war, all right? So the heart at war is kind of the cycle of doom that I showed you, okay? That would be a heart at war, where I am angry, I'm frustrated, my chest burns, right? My amygdala is flared up, I can't see the problem, I'm just kind of like a porcupine. Have you guys ever run into a porcupine? It's a bad deal. They shoot quills at you, and they hurt. My dog got a porcupine like right in his little face one time, and I didn't know what to do, so I was like just pulling on it, and my dad like smacked me, and there's a lot of little process. Yeah, that hurts, right? Porcupines, what happens is they get scared and they just quill you. Skunks spray you. It's kind of a natural response. That's what we do as well. We're in the kind of the porcupine mode, the heart at war mode. But what we need to do is obtain a heart of peace. And there's 2 ways that have to happen before we obtain a heart of peace. The first is that we need to see our spouse as a person. This may seem obvious, but most of the time, what I see is that we start talking about somebody that we're in conflict with as an object all the time. They're ridiculous. They're a jerk. They're a this. We start almost dehumanizing them to some extent. We don't see them as a person who's just like us, who has faults and flaws just like we do, who has dreams, hope, aspirations just like we do, and who may see the world in a different way, but they're essentially the same type. They're a person just like we are. And so for a lot of us, when we get angry with each other, we demand of our spouse something that we can't even provide to the relationship, that our expectations are so high for them that it's outside of the realm of even what we are. And so we begin to see them as an object that is there to make us happy rather than a person that we are in a relationship with. That's a big problem. It's a win and lose type of situation. And so if I win the argument and my wife loses, then we're both losers, right? Because if my wife loses that argument, she's mad, then it's not like I can really parade around and be successful, right? And if she wins that argument and I'm mad for a week, then we don't win, right? It's not a win or lose. That's why we have to come together with a solution, and that we're doing this together. That's why we like to we like to fight with the end in mind, with the goals in mind. Instead of fighting with each other, we fight with each other or for something of a goal or for something that we both want. So we have to see our spouse as a person. Now, biblically speaking, this is a pretty clear idea that we are created in the image of God, that I'm not uniquely special. I'm not some kind of like divine authority. I'm a human just like my wife is human, right? And so I am called to see her as a person. That helps. And this one is a much bigger deal. Is I have to get over the need to justify myself. Now, what does that mean? So, the fundamental need in all of this is a kind of a deep burning need for justification. Anybody have any idea what that means, justification? The idea of being made right, I'm going to justify. So, if I am being justified by what my spouse thinks of me, then I actually need her to agree with me or to affirm me in order to feel right. I also am going to make her or be in an argument. It creates that need to win the argument. And what biblically is that we have an external justification that comes from Christ. That's why Christians believe that Christ justifies us. But we have to get over this need to justify ourselves. Because when we can get over the need to justify ourselves, it helps us see the problem, first and foremost. So go back to that scenario where my wife's cooking, right? And I come home and I'm like, what? Why are you yelling at me? But then I take the approach and I look around, right, and I realize I don't need to be justified by this moment. My wife doesn't have to be loving and accepting of me. I can actually recognize that I'm justified eternally by Christ. So I can look at her and say, she is not going to be the one who justifies me. I can see the problem. When I look around, because I've taken a deep breath, I see my kids are like peeling paint off the walls or spray painting the windows, like tipping each other over, flipping couches, and rioting. And I look and I say, wow, maybe the reason my wife's mad at me is that my kids are psychotic. It's not me at all, right? So now I can actually see the problem, what's going on. And so I may offer a different suggestion rather than just scream at her back, because usually she doesn't respond super well to that. So if I'm like, well, babe, you're a jerk, why are you yelling at me? I'm perfect, she's always like, yeah, you're right, I didn't know, I forgot, thank you for reminding me, I'm so glad that I married you. That's never happened. If I say, wow, what's wrong with our children? Here's the thing, how about I take the kids, I go run them through a fast food restaurant, let them burn some energy for an hour. I'll go get us something to eat. I'll put them to bed, and then we can have dinner. What do you think she's going to say then? She's probably going to cry, right? She asks me this every time I do this stinking illustration. She's like, when are you going to do that? I did it once, all right? It's a good story, but I'm working on, this is for me just as much as it is for you. All right, so, but it helps me see the problem. Getting over my need to justify myself helps me observe what's actually happening in the scenario. So now, instead of being angry and responding in anger, now I'm responding in love because I can observe what's actually going on and I'm considering her. Now, if you were to ask me before I walked in the door, what type of wife do you want, Jake? What do you think I would say? I would say, well, I would want a loving, kind, respectful, tender, not giving you any tips, wife, right? So what are you doing right now that's going to make that happen for you? And if I said, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to yell at her and set her straight. She's going to listen to me for once. You're probably going to be like, that's not going to get the result that you hope for, right? And so what am I doing right now that's going to get the result that I want? If I listen to her, hear what she has to say, and respond in a loving, kind way after I've seen the problem for what it is, I bet I have a much better option of actually getting the very thing I claim I want. But the problem is oftentimes we actually want a disrespectful, mean, angry spouse in order to justify our problems and justify myself. I don't feel like a good husband. I beat myself up about this. I feel guilty for a variety of reasons, and so then I will incite my spouse to be the problem so I don't have to actually look at my own heart. Facts, right? And I say every, as you never say every, but almost every relationship that I've done counseling with that is resulting in divorce, the guilty party in the marriage will actually incite the other spouse to do something crazy in order to justify their behavior. Facts. All the time. Because we have to have that to sleep at night. And so oftentimes we'll actually do the very thing we claim we don't want. We'll just incite them to do the very thing that we just, okay, so in order to get over that, we have to have a heart change in order to do this. And I'd say this, and literally, probably within the next 3 hours, I will feel myself respond to my amygdala, my heart will flare up, I'll get angry, and I'll begin to act out in such a way that just counters everything I've just told you. Because this is something that actually takes habitual practice over and over and over again over a very long period of time. The couple that did our premarital counseling, I remember very specifically him just being this gentle, kind, just loving soul. And I remember thinking, man, that's the kind of marriage I want to have. And he very clearly told me this is not how I always was. I had to work at this over a long period of time. I had to apply the gospel to my heart consistently over many years so that I would love my spouse well. And she was gracious to me during that time. And when he was the attorney general for the state of Texas at the time, or previous. So he just kind of had this aura about him that scared me to death anyway. But he passed away, and at his funeral, his wife said, 50 years, he never hurt me. And I was like, man, that's the type of marriage I want. But I can't do that. And if I'm not here, that I haven't got over this need to justify myself. And I have to do this every day because I'm just the worst, right? I have temper, and I'm just like everybody else, right? So I have to work at this constantly in order to understand and to see the problem and to get over this need to justify. I have to deal with the fact that I am made right, not by my spouse's agreeance of me, or not by my proving a point, or not by my presenting a perfectly demonstrated argument, but by Christ alone. And I recognize that in that, then I can humbly deal with my spouse because I know I'm a problem, just like I claim that she is. Okay, the second step is 2 steps in one, and that is, 1, build the relationship with others of influence and with her or him. What I mean by that is, ladies, maybe you can tell me this. Guys and ladies are different. Like if you're like complimenting him, and let's say he brings his wife and you're standing there to compliment him, you would say, how did a dirty dog like you marry somebody who's so amazing like her, right? Women don't work that way. You don't hear women say, how does a gross, dirty woman like you marry that guy, right? Like I've never heard that before. Like, guys, when they get together, like the things they say to like lovingly to each other, they're like, what's up, punk? What's up, jerk? And then they punch each other or something like that, right? Yeah, I've never heard, my wife has never walked up to another lady and been like, what's up, moron? This never happened. All right, so we don't work the same way. But so with that in mind, ladies, if one of your friends, your best friends in the entire world said something maybe along the lines of, where did you get that shirt? That is not my favorite shirt. It might hurt your feelings, okay? But probably you're going to overlook it and you'll probably laugh it off. If your deepest enemy, the person that you hate more than anything else, even so much as hints that she doesn't like your shirt, you will never forget that for a year, right? You'll be like, oh, why would she say that to me? She doesn't like my shirt, doesn't like this. And you may not, I'm just using this as an example, okay? So please, you're like, this is stupid. Bear with me. We tend to listen and tend to give greater grace to those who we are closer to and friends with. One of the ways that we break down the cycles of us not seeing them as another person is building a close friendship with them. When you got married, you didn't fall in love with your husband because you thought he was like the future MacArthur. Like you were like, I just want to get behind this man's wake and let him lead me It's a general officership. That's not what you thought, right? You talked, you fell in love, right? You had a relationship with one another. He spoke kindly to you. That's why the relationship, the friendship is why you got married, not because you hoped that he would be the next president, right? So, and guys, I mean, we fell in love with our spouses because they listened to us for once, And so we have this relationship and we forget this reality. You get busy, you get up early, you go do PT, you go to work all day, she's got the kids, you come home, you try to plead with them to eat their stinking food, you put them to bed, and then you sit there and just for an hour, and then you get up and you do it over again, right? You hope to find something on Netflix. Most of the time you argue about it, and then you just go to bed. And we have to be intentional on this to build our relationship with one another. And I don't know how that looks in your marriage, but you have to be willing to say, okay, we are in a bad place. Maybe we can just talk a little bit, 5 minutes about our day, and incrementally grow in that relationship. I used to joke, if you wanted to be an expert on butterflies, I don't know why, but let's just say you were like, I'm going to be an expert on butterflies. I'm going to read about a butterfly 10 minutes a day, every single day. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, at the end of the week, you'd know more about butterflies than I do, right? A significant amount. In about a month, you'd probably know more about any butterflies than anybody in this room, pending your college degree. In about a year, you did that every day for a year, I would guarantee you would know more about butterflies than everybody in this room, probably more than anybody in this installation. If you did it for 5 years, you might be writing books about butterflies, doing little TED Talks about butterflies. There might be something significant that we've missed as a culture regarding butterflies that you would illuminate us on. And you would be an expert. If you were to spend incrementally 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, just picking your wife's brain, seeing how she's doing, your husband, you may not be able to pick his brain much. He's just kind of vegging out. But guys, if you just agree for 5 minutes, I'm going to look you in the eye, she's going to look me in the eye, and we're just going to talk for just a couple seconds about our day, some things that we like, dislike, maybe some song we heard that we loved, some food we ate that we finally agreed on that we might future, made a plan to go get some dinner. And you have to be intentional, but the investment of building a relationship over the long haul, over the long period of time, makes you an expert on your spouse and builds the relationship that you have with them that nobody else has, right? And so we have to invest in building this relationship with our spouse. And once you do, once you know that person, once you are caring and interested, there's a variety of ways that we can do this. Going to places that they like and listen to them talk about it. Guys, it'd be great if you took your spouse to somewhere like that they enjoyed, not to an OU football game. Okay. I'm going to get too close there. All right. And this one is listen and learn. This plays into this building relationship piece. The idea of listening is the average person can speak for 7 seconds without being interrupted. 7. And a good listener isn't just somebody who can stare at you for a long enough period of time. It's somebody who can draw out of you everything that you're saying. Like, they can ask you questions. So if somebody says, I had a great day today, or you're like, so what was a good day? What was good about today? Well, we did this. What made that good? You're asking questions to draw out information that you're being a good listener. So being a good listener is important to solving the problem because then it helps you understand what the problem actually is. So if my wife says, hey, moron, quit flicking the light switch off, or the fan on and the light switch off and it keeps me cold, I would say, oh, I'm sorry. What about that makes you so mad? Right? And she would say, well, I get cold. I know, but it seems like it's more than that. Like what? Well, it doesn't feel like you care about me or you're not willing to listen to me whatsoever, or that it's not a big enough concern. I could draw out from her what the real problem actually is, and so that we could see it and solve the problem. But if I approach that with a need to justify myself, all I'm going to do is say, well, that seems like it's something to get worried about. Nice work, overreacting. Well, crazy. That's going to... I may have been regurgitating the exact phrase I used. I'm learning too. This is for me. All right. But we're listening and we're learning. We're learning about what's going on. We're drawing out of our spouse exactly what the issue is. This one is communicate, talk. And this is speaking for you, not for your spouse. It's not, you always do this, right? That's not what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. That's speaking for your spouse. It's communicating what you're saying, right? So when they listen and they say, that wall is black, you'd be like, you would say, no, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, which would be my tendency. You would say, so when you look at that wall, it looks black to you. And you shouldn't have that sarcastic look on your face. You're like, oh, it looks, tell me more. And they were like, well, it looks black. And you say, when I see that wall, it looks light brown. I don't know what color that is. It looks wood-colored. And then they would say, no, that's not what I see. And I'm like, okay, that's what I see. Well, you're just communicating what you perceive to be reality, right? It's just so often we get into fights, and the reason we're fighting is like we don't take each other at each other's word, but we're also communicating things for our spouse, and we're not articulating and using words about how we actually feel. Every time my kids throw a fit, I say, use your words, because I don't want to hear you scream, right? But it's the same thing with me. You have to be able to process exactly what is going on by using and communicating with your words and understanding what's going on. That make sense? All right. So when you get to this point, now you can kind of see the problem and you can begin the process of solving it. Getting over your need to justify yourself, see the spouse as a person. That puts my heart, it gives me a heart of peace. And then I begin to build that relationship. Now, you're going to find out, you're going to start this and you're going to try to do something and it's not going to work. You're going to try to build your relationship with your spouse. You're going to try to listen and they're not going to want to talk. And usually what you have to do is you have to go to the one below it and try that one. Because if you try to build a relationship with your spouse or with others of influence without having a heart of peace, that's called manipulation, right? Because you're doing it for a purpose of solving the problem. You're playing the game so that they'll actually understand. They'll be like, oh, you've tricked me into making you right. And if you're a good arguer, which a lot of you are, you'll do this, right? You'll actually build a relationship with your spouse just so that you can win an argument. I mean, well done, but it's not good for your marriage. If you're trying to listen and learn and they're not wanting to communicate, it could be because you don't have a relationship, right? You're trying to get them to talk, but they won't talk. It's because your relationship stinks. If you're talking, I'm like, if you're talking and nobody's listening, it could be me. I'm just kidding. I hope. But may be accurate. And that'd be because you haven't listened. So you're just talking and you haven't listened. You're talking and you don't have that relationship. You're talking and you're angry, so you're just shouting stuff, right? So all these things have to happen first before you begin to actually see and solve the problem. And I just know that for tons of marriages, most of the time, when people come in, they'll say, this is my problem, and I can almost 100% of the time guarantee you that's not the actual problem. There's something underneath there that they're not really willing to communicate because it's scary. Because it's hard to say, I don't feel like they love me. Because what if you're right? And so people get scared in those moments, and they don't want to communicate it. So they want to communicate what they're angry about, and they want that person to change and hope for the best, which is why we never really actually deal with the problem. We just come up with an alternative problem. Anybody ever been in a sensing session in the Army? They're awful. But oftentimes what happens is you'll get in a sensing session, and nobody wants to actually say what the actual problem is, right? They'll say, oh, we know what the problem is we just don't communicate up and down the chain of command. Which is like it's like the problem over here that everybody can agree on without getting their feelings hurt. It's like some arbitrary thing that doesn't exist. And so everybody's like, oh yeah, we're just not communicating up and down the chain of command. But what nobody really wants to say is like, the reason is because there's a person right here and they're a jerk, right? Nobody likes them. But nobody wants to say that in a sensing session because usually they put themselves in the sensing session, right? So we can't create alternative problems that we can both agree on just because we can both agree on it, okay? If you want to solve the problem that's going on, you have to be honest about it. You have to see the problem, and then you have to be able to then address the problem. And the only way you can address and solve a problem in this scenario is if you don't really have the need to justify yourself. Because guess what? If you're wrong, it's hard to admit it, right? One of our first fights as a married couple, okay, so I got premarital counseling, and they said, mark 3 months on your calendar. And I was like, why? And they're like, well, the first 3 months is the honeymoon phase, and you want everything to go really, really well, so you'll avoid arguments for 3 months, and you'll push those. But at 3 months, you can pretty much mark it down, all hell will break loose. And it's because all the arguments that you had in the first 3 months that you didn't address are now all piled up into one big argument, and you're just going to nuke each other. Well, that's what happened. I was like, well, I'm a pastor, and I have this figured out. I do marriage counseling. I'm pretty much an expert at being a husband. Turns out I wasn't. In fact, I would say things, my wife would have a problem, and I'd be like, well, babe, that's not really a problem. See, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. See, I solved your problem. I'm super smart. I'm in seminary. I'm a pastor. Boom. Apparently, that's not what she wanted to hear. And we got into a big one, okay? We got into a big one. And it turns out that I was the one who was at fault. Because for the last 3 months, I had been basically telling her that all of her problems weren't really problems. And that I was the one who was always right, and that she was the one that was always wrong. And that if she just saw it my way, that everything would go so much smoother in our marriage. But actually, when I realized that I was the problem, it was super big relief, because I was like, man, that means I can solve this and that she's not crazy. Do what? Okay, what is it? Okay, oh, sweet. So, yeah, I mean, like, it is actually a relief once you actually realize that your problem is almost solvable because you own some of it, right? And so it's to embrace those things, to understand it, to forgive each other, and to move on, all plays a role in here. So what I want to do, so I went through that generally pretty fast. And some of it is things that maybe you have definitely heard before, or maybe you haven't. I want to give you the opportunity to maybe ask some questions about some things, and again, be safe and kind to each other. But anybody have any questions about kind of some of the material that I went over? You can just kind of raise your hand and shout it out. We have plenty of time. You're not holding us up or anything. Anybody? Oh, brother. Yes. Yeah. So this is what I encourage people to do. There's 2 ways, and the first way, if it doesn't work, try the second way. That's an obvious statement. First way is keep it simple, right? So you have to, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll encourage somebody to write it down and to look at it and be like, is this what I want to communicate? So it needs to be brief. So part of the skills of learning to communicate, and we'll talk about this a little bit next month, but it is like learning to keep your statements brief and to the point. Because a lot of times what people will do is they'll just go on and on and on and on about the same thing, trying to explain it, but you don't have to do that. So what I would say is keep your first statement brief, and then allow your spouse to ask questions about your statement. So if I said, babe, I really don't feel like that you love and care for me, that's a pretty big statement, and it's a pretty general statement. And then I would give her the opportunity to ask the question, like, what makes you feel like that? Or ask a series of questions about that particular thing, and then I would be able to clarify exactly what I meant. And so that's another thing, too. Communicating in this kind of deal is both a partnership for both of you in the sense that who here is just a great communicator of your problems? You get really emotional, and you articulate it well. I actually am a pretty good communicator of my problems. My wife is not. Super unfair, right? And so I can communicate very articulately exactly what's going on, and my wife gets really angry, and she loses every argument. Okay, so, but if I want to solve the problem and make both of us happy and not manipulate the circumstances for my favor, right, then what I have to do is I have to really slow down. I have to ask her questions about how she's feeling in order to get to the really heart of it, right? And so if I get angry or she gets angry, then doing that is helpful. So keep them brief, keep the statements brief, and then allow your spouse to ask questions about specifically your statement. And the key to that, to some extent, is only speak for yourself. I think it's prep. I think I just give you the whole prep marriage curriculum. But if you make sure that you're like only saying, what I see is this, I see that you're doing this, is a stretch, but you're like, this is how I see it. I could be wrong. At least let your spouse do it. But I would write it down, okay? If for some reason you write it down and you go over it and you get to the point where you're arguing and you just can't articulate, even come close, and you just screw it completely up, I always recommend getting a chaplain or getting somebody else as basically a referee. And that's for me personally, when I do marriage counseling, what I try to do, and I don't always do this, there's different scenarios a different way, but what I like to do is just basically like hold a whistle, right? I'm like, you talk, and they're like, you stop. All right, what'd they just say? Like, I don't say anything really, and then they would try to articulate, that's not what he just said. Try again. They would say it. All right, did she get it right? No. All right, try again. And then we just sit there and literally over and over again until both of them have been heard. And usually once they both have been heard and both understood, then you're kind of to the point where you do that. But you develop that habit. So that's a skill set that really you have to develop as a couple to be able to listen and hear, bounce back and forth, and clarify. If you get to the point where you can do that well, you are going to find a lot of peace in your marriage because you can solve and get to the heart of the problem really, really quickly. That make sense? Did I answer your question? It sounds great, right? Like it does. It sounds good. You're like, oh yeah, amen. You get in the argument, and that's not how it goes down, right? But it takes lots and lots of practice and lots of structure and habits to build it out. Okay, what else? What you got? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so he was really remarkable in the sense that he was a wildly disciplined human being. So he took a lot of, for personally, this is just, so what he asked was, how did that guy get to, Dr. Jerry, how did he get to the point where he was, the way he was? He would say that a couple times a day, he would take an inventory of his morning and his evening. He would look at all the things that he said and did, and then he would specifically apply some wisdom, some meditation, some corrective. He would memorize scripture and kind of go over it, think about it, and over and over again. He would, over a period of time, he developed, just a kind, gentle attitude to the point where when they would walk into a room, he treated her like she was fine china. It was crazy. He would pull out her chair. He would whisper in her ear. He would set her down. He would do all this. She was perfectly capable of doing any of that, right? But he would just dote over her all the time. And I was like, my gosh, that's remarkable. Simultaneously being the Attorney General of the state of Texas, where everybody's listening to everything. He's on those commercials like, don't smoke, and you're going to die. And everybody listened to everything he said, but he would just, it was awesome. Great human. Yeah. What else? Okay, so here's what we're going to send you. We're going to send you the link to Right Now Media, and then you can get on there, and you can apply, and you can get on there. And we'll have some marriage stuff that you can look at to prep next month, sorry. We are actually we have it written down for October the 13th. That's a 3-day weekend, and Awana wants to be off that weekend. And so we agree, and so we're going to do it October the 20th. Okay, so we're going to create then an event on the Facebook page just like we did, and it'll be there. I'm going to publish the link for the Right Now Media, and I believe that we recorded this, and I'll actually be able to put the link on in the thing, so if you need to listen to something one more time or something like that, you can do that. If you have questions or anything like that, you need some further counseling or help, we have a handful of resources kind of right here. So we have a group that is doing world-class marriage, but also does some counseling, and that's the Naputis, Esther and Caleb, and the Coles. You can just raise your hand. Here's some folks who are resources, and then we have a handful of chaplains who are in the building. If you'll raise your hand real quick. Chaplain Bielefeld, Chaplain Schubert, and Chaplain Kemp is in the back. also can be great resources and helps, and we want to connect you to different things. So here at our chapel service, we're trying to do a handful of different things where we're getting people involved in community. And so a lot of that has to do with, building some relationships with people. It's really easy to get isolated in Korea once you arrive and you're off post or even on post. To be honest, it's easy to get isolated. We want to create and facilitate opportunities for you to get connected to the people who are here with you. So there's in your bulletin that we handed it to you. There's a handful of events that are happening that you're more than welcome to invite to. We're not trying to pressure you into anything. This isn't a rope-a-dope type of scenario, but we do want to facilitate an opportunity for you to get connected. So in that, for women, they have the women's IF table, which is the 23rd, and that's a really great opportunity just to meet and connect with other women. There's like PWCs, there's Bible studies, there's things like that we can get you into. But those are really good kind of next level, next step type of things that we can get you connected. For guys, we're working on a men's night. I actually talked to JP's Barbecue, and we're just going to rent out his entire restaurant. It's going to be legit. And then he's just going to feed us catered barbecue all night. So the meat sweats, and it'll be legit. That's going to be in October. We'll publish that information. But in that list of things, there's a handful of opportunities. There's also, by the way, the clothing swap next week. Have you guys heard of the clothing swap? It's going down. There'll be tons of clothes here. If you're like, I didn't bring any clothes to swap, please don't. We have so many clothes. But you're more than welcome to bring them if you need to get rid of them, but just come and grab clothes. So there's a lot of things going on that we want to kind of partner with you and get you connected. Obviously, we have chapel on Sunday mornings that you can help build and get connected with people. But if you have any questions of any of us, please do grab us afterwards. It's 5 till, and the kids turn into pumpkins. And so if you can take a little break and then go grab them, and I think they'll be ready to take off. But a handful of us will be up here, and we can answer any questions that you might have. Let's close in prayer, and then we can take off.